oneness.
There you go.
And so as we all relax and using the breath, on the inhale, it's as if we're lifting up our spirit, our soul, our awareness. And then on the exhale, relaxing into that spacious, awake awareness that is our true nature. I am here now. That's what's true. And so again, using the breath on an inhale, just to allow that breath to come in. It will always be flowing in. And as we relax into exhaling, we go deeper and wider and into the infinity that is our true nature. Awareness has no limits. We are here and now, one in this space. I am that. This is source of everything that arises. And as we come here and acknowledge this as the home, as the one, we know ourselves as this. And in this spacious awake awareness, we are all exactly the same. This is what oneness is. And I am that. Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that. Feel the fullness, the true nature of reality as love and freedom and peace and happiness. Always available, just a breath away, just an acknowledgement, a dropping of the mind and falling into the heart, not the heart that we locate with the body, but the heart of all that is. We are one there. There's the one heart, always available. Everything that arises in this spacious, awake awareness, consciousness, available on behalf of our creation. And when our minds are clear and our hearts are open, our creation can be a new earth, a new heaven, a new reality. What an amazing experience to be together, acknowledging the oneness that we all always knew and know as what is, but now experiencing it as Sangha, as beloved, mystical, powerful community. As each one of us makes this shift to coming home, to our true nature, no longer obfuscated or deformed or distorted by fear, we will redream a new reality. And that's where we are now together to begin that process by clearing anything that stands in the way of the love, the blessing, the truth of the one I am. And so it is.
Teresa, Vandy, Heidi, and Gwen have joined us.
All right, welcome, welcome. I wish I could see you. There's a story I tell often, an experience with my youngest grandson on the beach in Brazil, where we were living together for about 6 months. And he was sitting by me on the beach, and I had a bathing suit on, and he was playing with the soft, gummy part of grandma's arm. He's like, "Why are you so soft?" I said, "Because I'm so old." And he said, "What do you mean you're old?" And I said, "Well, oh, just, you know how we have birthday parties and we have celebrations. That means we're a year older." He said, "Oh, we have birthday cake." I said, "That's right." He said, "I got it. Birthday cake makes you soft." I always use that as an example of, he got the correlation, but not cause, right? And so the correlation that I like to point to is that there's a direct correlation between the trauma we experienced early in our childhood and what we think of as who we are. But the cause in the matter is not the trauma itself, but what we concluded that it meant about us when that happened. So this is a shift in perspective. It relieves you of blame to a great degree, and it brings home the possibility and the work that we do using the 6 steps to freedom process, which all of you can get a sheet on. And we probably will do it today together with some of you. But it's the forgiveness comes when we realize that we concluded that when mommy didn't pick us up from kindergarten on time, that it meant that we did not matter or that we were unimportant, because that conclusion is what got installed. And that is what is causing the matter of the projected reality, the distortion field within which your world arises. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. Yeah, so that's the place that we work. I have great appreciation and for what would be called the direct path, which is just the acknowledgement and the living from that true nature that we experienced together in the meditation. Knowing ourselves as awake awareness, knowing ourselves as consciousness in which realities arise, and that awareness permeating our experience and our expression. That's called the direct path. But I've never found anybody who could go there without doing the shadow work. And the shadow work is fundamentally informed by our early wounding and the conclusion that we created about ourselves. It's like an identity core. It was like, and it operated as an installation, nearly like an operating system, or at least an app, right? So what we want to do in the work that we do is to experience our true nature. And everybody in here, you wouldn't be in here if you hadn't had some experience of that. So to uplift that, to enshrine that as what's true, at the same time that if we're triggered by anything, to use that as the opportunity to clear up whatever we concluded when we were 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years old that was never true, but which has created a distortion field in which our reality shows up. So that's the progressive path. It's the undoing of everything that stands in the way of what is already always true for each one of us as true nature. The progressive path is the undoing of anything that obviates, that distorts, that has been played out. And that in the process that we use, that it is through forgiveness that we approach the conclusion not therapeutically, because you there's a kind of catch-22 using a therapeutic model that I ran into many years ago, which is that it's like an investment in what's not true. So that if you have a wounded identity of I'm not good enough or I don't matter, and you do therapy on it, what's likely to happen is that you'll go to the other end of that stick, because mind operates at the level of polarity. The mind is caught in what's called in Rudyard Kipling, the pairs of opposites, right? So, and language is caught in that same dilemma, because any word you say has got the implication of the opposite. So if I say good, we think bad. If I say black, we think white. So language holds this. That's why it's called the fall, right? It's like we fell out of our hearts. This is directionally inaccurate, but we fell out of our hearts and into our minds, caught up with the mental idea of reality, seen through the distortion field of what happened in our favorite story, the garden story, the distortion field of being bad, of being wrong, of being guilty, of being shameful, of having disobeyed God. And in that self-definition that Adam and Eve took on, they expelled themselves from the garden, from the heart, and into the mind, the knowledge of good and evil, the language, the polarity, the good and the bad. So what we want to do is never, ever try to override if we get triggered. I always say that a trigger is like gold. If you're triggered, you have direct access into what you believed that created your early self-definition that we call the wound. It's the ego definition. It's the definition of being a person who's not good enough or not important, right? So whenever you're triggered, that's like what the reason you're triggered is because you re-experience what the early wound was like for you. And so you have access now. So what I did is a amazing spiritual bypass for 2 decades, probably, right? Which was I could look like I had no resistance. I looked like I was totally without any opposition to whatever was showing up. That was not the truth. But with that adaptive behavior, I never took advantage of being triggered. What I had to create in order to have the big trigger was what I call, and most of you have heard this story, the episode of Dallas without the sex. If you remember that Dallas was a nighttime soap opera, right? About money and property and oil fields in Dallas, Texas. Yeah. But I created a similar version of that with my family, with money, property, and family. And that blew up the identity that I'd held so tightly with adaptive behaviors. I believe that all of us who are in response to our true nature, in response to what's available in this time of amazing transition technologically and in every other way across this planet, I believe that all of us are responsible, like I said in the meditation induction, to redream a reality. And as the dreamer of the reality, if you're caught in a limited self-concept, you're limited with your frequency, because that's what, and I think everybody in here would be to have to some degree agree with this, but if you don't, you can always wave me down and say, Polly, that's not true. And we'll talk about it. But the thing about frequency is that the frequency of the wounded identity keeps us creating a world that looks like there's a problem, because the way we got to be the person that we think ourselves to be is by the way we learn through adaptive behaviors to address external problems, external reality. So today, what we'll do with anybody who wants to bring something forward, whether it's a topic or a question, we can run the 6 steps with anybody who has a trigger they want to take a look at. I'm totally available for any of that, or for sitting quietly together, whatever works for you guys, and you guys too.
So if you have a question on Zoom, please hit the reaction button and raise your hand that way so I can see where you are and spotlight you. And of course, if you're here, just go ahead and raise your hand.
Oh, good that everybody's totally enlightened. I'm impressed.
Or not recently triggered.
I just want to let everybody know I did forget to bring the external mic today. So if you're speaking from here, if you could speak loudly so everybody could hear you on the Zoom, that would be much appreciated. Yeah, Becky has her hand up back there.
So I have an ongoing sense that I should be better than I am. That, gee, I've been working on myself for so many years and I still deal with depression. Not generous enough, probably not disciplined enough. It's that ongoing thing that I'm not okay the way I am. And so I'd love to hear how you work with that.
So let's just make sure people can hear. Can you give us a thumbs up if you could have, if you heard Becky? You heard her. Okay, great.
They did.
Deborah did.
Okay. Yeah, so this is not atypical.
I might not be the only one who has this issue.
So maybe repeat it because Kim said they could just barely hear it.
Yeah, but Becky was just saying that she has a lot of self criticism, a lot of identity is not being good enough, of not doing it right. Anything, what else she said?
I'm not a good enough person.
She's not a good enough person.
Be further along.
She should be further along. She's been doing this kind of work for a long time. Yeah. It's really interesting because the one that's reporting that to me that can see that is awareness, right?
Yeah.
But what they're reporting is the way in which the person, the me, has confiscated consciousness on behalf of this limited fear-based identity. Right? So the opportunity here seems simplistic, but the opportunity is that if you can see it, in other words, you're coming from awareness and you can see everything you just described to me as the person who should have gotten it by now or whatever, you can see that that is, well, to make it simple, simplistic, it's an object. That character, that version of you, even though it contains all of the stories of your life and the way you played the main character within them, even though it contains that, it's actually it's something that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, which is what defines or describes an object. So just realizing that you can see it, that you can observe it, that that's something that you have. And if you have it, it's not who you are. There's one of my favorite lines from the Course in Miracles is, whatever is real cannot be threatened. What is unreal does not exist. Therein lies the peace of God. What is unreal is this creation that we've all created out of our early wounding, the core identity of I'm not good enough or I'm not important. And around that, because that was there, what showed up kept reflecting that it was true or the opposite, right? Again, the polarity at the level of mind. And so we've got great investment in these fear-based identities. And they seem to, and this is, if there were a cosmic joke, it would be this. If you believe it, you will create the reality that confirms it. And now it's like, I'm believing something that's not true. And now I've got the whole world that reflects to me that I'm not good enough and I should be over this by now. And all of the things that you said. Does that make sense?
No.
Okay, let's try again. If you can see it, you're telling me about this persona that you say is you, right? I'm telling you that it's not you, that it's something you made up unavoidably out of an early experience.
I agree, and I know that. Even knowing that, I should be able to work with it, let go of it.
Who needs to work with it?
The one who's tired of suffering.
Right, but that's the one that you created out of the lie. It's a positional dynamic here. If you can stand with me and we can see the creation out of the lie, this awareness does not need to work with that. It needs to see clearly that it was never true and stop identifying with it.
How does one make themselves stop identifying with the story?
Can you repeat the question for people?
How does one,
Make one stop identifying with the story.
so
Stop identifying.
Becky's asking what,
Seem to keep identifying.
well, but if you know it, what you're pointing to is you as awareness that knows it. Yeah,
Perfectly.
awareness is not identified with it. So there's a kind of perceptual shift possible. And whenever it's possible, if you employ it, you'll have a little toehold into a larger possibility. And that perceptual shift is, if I can see it, I'm not it. You can see the story. You can see all of the drama. It's like coming into a Broadway theater and being handed the playbook, and it tells you the whole story there and the main characters, and there you are, right? But you're holding it in your hand. So the perceptual shift is, simply put, if you can see it, you're not it. If I can see anything, I can see an apparent other. That's Robin. This is not me. I can see the computer. But to start to, out of that, whatever experience you have of falling into awareness, out of the mind and into that vibrant, awake awareness that is our true nature, that's the aspect of that which is employed in a perceptual shift is the witness. And from that perspective, you've got that playbook in front of you. Central casting has sent in all the clowns that help to people your reality that you've created with this identity, right? So it's like backing out. It's like, come home. Come home. You don't have to play that game anymore. You keep insisting on that game. You know, you're committed to that game. So I want to know if you're willing, are you willing to be made whole? Are you willing to step out of the lie? I know it's been many years, many lifetimes probably, but it's time. We didn't incarnate this time to slosh around in victim identities. We incarnated to wake up out of the victim identity so that we can become conscious co-creators with awareness with what is. That's a different frequency, and that will create a different world. And it will create a different world for you when that shift happens for you. So I invite you to step back a little bit and to stop believing and repeating that story of being a victim and of doing everything right and nothing good happened. That does not serve you. And thank you for sharing, sweetheart. I love you. Truly. Yeah. You can wake up.
Part of what she said, like I heard her say, I'd like to, can I interact with this, what you were saying, Becky? I heard you say,
If it's about you.
No.
but not if it's about.
all right, well, it's about anyone who has something to say, well, I wish I was more this, or I wish I was more that. So what if there's some valid wish? Like, I'm just gonna make this up because
Okay.
I'm not a person who needs that.
And just remember to speak as,
Okay, what if you have a thing like, I wished I exercised more, I wished I ate better.
Mhm.
And that's not a thing necessarily about my character or but something like you have a valid wish and it makes you feel like, what's wrong with me? Or how come I don't play better, I'm not good enough, that I can't do that. So what if there's like a valid wish or a valid observation? It's not about something necessarily from your early childhood.
Mm.
Then it just has no charge to it, or it has no trigger to it, or
No, it has no charge to it. And you'll either do it or you won't. But if it gets to the place that you came in second there with that you're a piece of shit if you don't do it, then you're triggered.
not a piece of shit. That's a little like
Well,
just
that-
like
that
good,
you're
I'm not as
in
good as I
inept.
could be.
You're not as good. That's a trigger. That's
Yeah.
a trigger.
So
That's
because of
childhood
that-
wound. Yeah.
But what if it's true? What if you really could exercise more, or you could eat better, and you're wondering why you don't?
Well,
Just using that.
you're either doing what's in front of you to do, or you're caught in a distortion, a lens of self-judgment. All judgment is self-judgment. So when that starts to clear, you'll either be doing it or you won't, but it will not be of concern. It won't be
Won't be a judgment.
right.
I'll either feel like, oh, well, I could exercise more, so I think I will, or no.
Or you'll either be doing it or you won't be doing it. It actually, what happens
It's free
is
of the judgment.
when the judgment, the self-judgment falls away, all judgment falls away, you're in the present moment and you're doing what's in front of you to do, or you're not, and it doesn't matter. It's no longer full of meaning and judgment.
It's not associated with the storyline that keeps on unfolding.
Yeah, that's right.
It's free
That's right.
of that. You just see
Yeah.
something without the storyline.
Right. Yeah. And so typically what the storyline is created out of is the self-judgment that created the distortion field, because then you will project the judgment onto an apparent other, or to a circumstance of limitation, or to a story of your life. You know, it's like, so the reason that we work at the core of self-judgment, which was the early wounding conclusion, and we work it through forgiveness. The reason that we work there is because when that is cleared, the entire reality clears. That's like the operating system, the installation that creates this reality in which there's something against you, or you're not doing it right, or things never work out, or I've been doing this for forever and it's never changed. All of those things show up in a field that is a projection through that distortion lens of self-judgment. When that self-judgment is cleared, then there's no judgment for anything. So there are a couple of things about the simple, totally, what do I say, what's just our nature to be awake as our true self. That arises whenever there's not self-judgment there, we already have that experience. And once we've done the work of clearing that, then there's no separation. So we have the experience of being present in the moment, because there's not fear to take us into the future or regret to take us into the past. So that whole present moment conversation is revealed, right? The other thing is that because there's no judgment separating us from this, we experience the connection, the oneness, the ease of the flow of the other and the whatever circumstances. So the oneness thing is fulfilled. At the same time that we are no longer caught in fear, and therefore we don't have to try to get anything or avoid anything to be okay. That's the motivation of the fear-based ego, of it, that's centered by an unavoidable conclusion by most often a 3-year-old or before, and sometimes past life, where it felt like, I'm not good enough. I'm not going to make it. There's nobody here for me, whatever that conclusion was. When that falls away, then we're present in the fullness of our true nature. And that child that we talk about as being the wounded child becomes the child that Jesus pointed to that enters the kingdom of heaven. That's our nature at that level of alertness, aliveness, and fun. Yeah. Yeah, so there's not any intersection that you were pointing to, Grace, where everything can be cleared. Yeah, it's either clear or it's the wound, some version of it. Yeah, which is really good news, because I like things that are simple.
So it's possible to observe anything about myself, anything I see, without a judgment on it.
Yeah.
And that is a state of awareness
That's
where
right.
there's no suffering.
That's right.
That's what I got it.
Perfect. Thank you. Cliff notes. Yeah.
Holly, I was sharing this 6 steps with somebody, and they actually had an abusive childhood where it was real to them.
Mhm.
And so and the conclusions that they made seemed like they could have been real to them because they were abused, they
Right.
were mistreated, they were hurt. And how would you work with someone like that because they actually feel that they were
Right.
done wrong?
Right. Yeah, well, that's typically for every one of us, what pulled us into fear and self self-judgment really did happen. We're not denying that something really did happen. The thing that we're moving towards is, what did I believe that meant about me? Because I've worked with people who had serious trauma and abuse, right? But the abuse and the trauma was not what created their identity as being not good enough, or being a throwaway, or being whatever the conclusion was, because what we want to get to is what you concluded about yourself when that happened. I don't know anybody. I mean, I'm reading Gabor Mate's most recent book called The Myth of Normal. And he talks about there aren't any good early experiences for infants and toddlers and young children, because the parents have been distorted. They're caught in their own woundedness. No matter how loving they are, the child can still, and his son narrate that, I listen to books, I can't read them. His son narrates this book, and his son is very clear about his experience with Gabor Mate and his mother, and his feeling of alienation and his own woundedness. And they were conscious, well-meaning, the way many of us in here have been, and did as good of parenting as we could, but that didn't take away the conclusion that the child met that kept them caught up in self-judgment. So do you see that? You see the difference? Yeah. It's not the trauma, and it really did happen. There isn't anybody nobody's pretending that trauma didn't happen, but that's not what causes it's again, well, that goes back to my first story. There's a correlation there, but the cause is the conclusion. There's a correlation between the trauma and where I go to in regard to who I believe I am. Yeah.
Could have never been true. That's the line when we go, believing something about myself that could have never been true.
It's never
Forgiving
true.
myself for believing a lie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was unavoidable. Yeah, unavoidable, but not true.
It's not the what, it's what we make of it,
Yeah.
what story we tell ourselves. Thank you for the way that you articulated that.
Who am I talking to?
Joy,
Joy.
yeah, thank you.
I'm so glad you're here.
Good to meet you.
So any topics somebody wants to,
I'll bring up a talk
okay,
about being empathic and being highly sensitive.
mm,
So curious if that's something you identify with, and if so, how you walk through the world with those gifts and the challenges that come with it.
Can you repeat it?
Yeah.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, Joy asked about being empathic and highly sensitive. And she even asked us whether or not I have those qualities, which I don't. I always think of myself as the most insensitive person, and like I have a neurology that's just like a caveman, right? I mean, nothing bothers me, kind of thing, but but the reality of that is, who are you being to yourself in regard to it? That's always going to be where you get to. You see, it's like whatever is that, because instead of interfacing with what feels like is cause in the matter, which is going to probably look like circumstances or other people out there. It's like, who am I being to myself in regard? It's coming home. There's this kind of profound, simplistic direction for all of us, which is about coming home. Come home, find that place. And in that spaciousness, the fullness of acknowledging and experiencing ourselves as awareness. From that place, we can live into whatever's showing up, because then whatever's showing up does not carry the frequency of fear. See, if we're caught up out there trying to work it out, or even caught up in here, like with hypersensitivity or empathic sensitivity, if we're caught up in here, then we're going to be working it out in a way that carries, even if it's a subtle frequency, it's going to be some frequency of fear about exposure, about being caught up in an external situation. So as we bring everything back to ourselves from this place, then we have this, I am here now, and this is what I've got, right? Whether it's a friend or circumstance or whatever, but it's coming home. It's like what happened with the early wounding was that our attention particles were, perhaps they had been all within the psyche of the infant or the toddler as being all inclusive, like the whole world is about a 2-year-old, right? It's like everything's about them, right? And then something happens out there, in quotes, looking like mommy and daddy fighting, or being left at kindergarten and not picked up on time or whatever. And at that point, we are magnetized into the external. It's like our attention particles have been like this, and now they're like this. And there's a high alert, and and that is an adrenalized, so it affects every kind of system in our neurology, everything, brain chemistry, everything. And so the waking up part is about reclaiming your attention from out there. The way we do it, one way we do it, is when you're triggered to do the work and to find the conclusion about oneself. I'm not good enough, I don't matter. That's a path. The other way is to simply come home to yourself and sit with, I am here now, and this is what's true. It's not good to do that if you haven't done the other work, because you can bypass the formative, powerful, repressed, hardly ever seen or acknowledged identity that was created out of the woundedness. So it's a coming home thing. Yeah.
So Ria has a question.
What is the thing that we should not do before the other?
So repeat the question.
Yeah, she wants to know, what did I say about which thing to do before the other? Did I get it right? This thing before the other. It sounds like a nursery rhyme. Yeah, what you don't want to do is to override, though, when you're triggered. I don't know if that's what I said or not. Yeah. Yeah, but you want to really be available for whatever you're experiencing. And from that place, bring it home. And then from that home place, do the 6 steps that, do we have copies of those?
It's on the email. If you're on the email list, it's on the email that goes out with the email.
Yeah, and I'm available to do the 6 steps with anybody, most anytime. I do private sessions, and we can do sessions here. But the steps are when you're triggered, it's to realize that it's about you, and that name the feeling that's occurring in this incident that's going on right now. And then remember when the first time you felt it, because that's going to take you back to the early experience out of which you concluded something about yourself that was unavoidable, but not true. Yeah. So what we don't want to do is override that. Now, in a situation where you're clear, but you're needing to come home to yourself, you need to go inward, be present on your own behalf, because fundamentally, in the early wounding dynamic, what we did was we self-abandoned necessarily, because it looked and was probably true that our well-being depended on an external caretaker or parent or other. So, yeah, we just never want to override Coming home to authenticity is what waking up is all about. And authenticity was what was taken away with the early adaptive behaviors. We couldn't authentically say that doesn't feel good, or I'm not okay with that when we were 4 years old, because our well-being depended on this apparent external other. We were caught, right? And so part of the waking up is to become authentically on your own side. Authenticity, like I said, was not available to the child. And the frequency of authenticity is probably the highest frequency as a body-mind unit you can aspire to in your interactions and relationships and dynamics in this 3D reality. The love that we all already are goes without question. I am that. And that's what's true. And that's what we find in the space of awake awareness. So we don't have to try to figure out how to be loving. We likely will have to try to figure out at some intersections what it means to be authentic, because it was ruled out way, way, way early. Way early. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah. And I saw it, but I think I heard,
Please.
I think you were just saying not to override or not to skip the deep work of finding the core identity.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, don't skip it. No.
We have about 8 more minutes of Q&A. If anyone has a question or thought.
I think that the all of the new age stuff about creating your own reality always was off-putting to me. I felt like what egos did with that kind of admonition, you create your own reality, was most of the time, at a minimum, unattractive. At a maximum, is really, really off-putting. But the way in which reality works has a correlation to that too. It's not literally that. And because what we'll do then is we'll use it to blame ourselves. We'll use it to turn against ourselves. But at the nature of what we know from quantum physics is that whenever there is a frequency, in quantum physics, they would call it a wave, that the wave collapses into materiality by an observer or a measurement, right? So the way that this correlates to our experience is that we are frequency emitters, right? And I was just pointing to the frequency of our true nature is already awake awareness. It is the highest power of love, not the horizontal love thing, but the reality of the power of the universe is love, right? That's already there. That's a frequency. So that's the underpinning of the quantum field. What we bring into play is whatever frequency we're emitting, and you can't fool Mother Nature, right? I always say to people, don't think you can be more grateful and shift your frequency. It will not shift your frequency. But what you can do is to start to be authentic. What you can do, because when you are saying what's true for you, when you're coming home to yourself, then the observer of that wave, right, that's going to show up as your life, is being measured and lifted into a frequency of self-regard, into a frequency of true nature, a matching frequency to awareness. Does that make sense to everybody? Kind of, a little bit? Yeah. So it's a frequency, this is a kindergarten model. It's a frequency deal, and you can't fake it. but coming from being on your own behalf, coming from saying what's true, coming from being willing to connect when you can, and when you can't, notice it as a trigger so that you can find out what you've been believing that's keeping you from connection, that's keeping you from what you want, which is what you want is yourself. The country western song "Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places" describes it perfectly, right? We look for it out there. I have a little adage that says you can't get enough of what you don't need. You can't get enough money, you can't get enough attention, you can't get enough of anything from out there, because out there is a projection of your belief that you're not important, or that you're not good enough, or whatever else. So it's compelling. It's it's like, believe it, hell, I can prove it. It's like, let me tell. It's like it's like Becky said, let me tell you about my life. And we all know that. We all know the stories. We've all had the experiences, but we can come home, and that's the opportunity in this collective consciousness now, at this time in history, through technology and through our ability to be together in a sangha, whether virtual or local, acknowledging that we all hold the same value of a higher possibility for the nature of reality experienced in this 3D world. I used to call the work that I do becoming lucid in the dream. And if any of you have ever been lucid in a dream, you understand what I'm talking about. But we become lucid in this waking dream by acknowledging the character that we've been playing. This is the avatar in the virtual reality game that we said, oh, it feels like it's not good enough. It's working really hard, but nothing ever changes. All of the attributes of this avatar now is what's running. And we're sitting back in the game chair going, oh my God, really? It's like, how did that happen? So we have the opportunity to come home to the one I am, and from that place to play out for the fun and the variety and the beauty and the excitement of a 3D reality. I invite you to play happily in the fields of the Lord, the fields of your true nature, the field of awake awareness, for the fun of it. We'll get to meaning and purpose later if necessary.
I could add, it's not a question, but it's just coming up from where you just were talking. Can you hear me, Polly?
I can, Deborah, thank you.
So it happened twice, once yesterday and once again today. And yesterday I was receiving body work, and it was feeling so good, super relieving, because my body's been, going through a little bit as it's dealing with this stuff. And so I just felt all this part is not unfamiliar, to be receiving body work and just feel these hands. It feels like love, it feels so loving. And the thing I perceived, I did not think this. I did not at all think this. I've never, ever had a thought like the one I'm about to say. It just was the perception, was that the love was myself touching this body. It was so beautiful. And awareness knew I had that perception. And awareness could remember that I didn't used to perceive that but there it was as clear as a bell. And I knew that person was standing there doing that, but still I recognized it as myself. And so that was, and I didn't feel like I was in any extremely altered state of anything. It was just like, it was more like duh, it was like that, simple. And then today, a variety of that happened. I was teaching a class, and I won't be seeing them next week because of Thanksgiving, and then the following week is the day of the surgery the hip replacement. So at the end of the class, they all like, oh, could we do a healing for you, Deborah? And I said, sure. And they said, and they started saying, you know, you, all these years at Spirit Rock and all these events and all these classes, you've given all this love. And we just want to shine it back to you. Some I didn't, there wasn't an I registering that I did that, but as they did this healing, this body, mind, or something perceived, I don't know how to describe it, but in a way that I never perceived it in all those hundred thousands of classes and events and all those retreats, that it was just the love again of the one love moving through and as through this. Anyway, it was a lot like yesterday, except it's harder to describe, and both of them were super delightful. So I just connect it to all this time with you, and I share it in joy.
The wonder of not being a person. It's wonderful. Yeah. Thank you. Deborah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.
So we are at the top of the hour here. We are going to take a short pause if you need to use the restroom. If you want to stay on the Zoom, that's great. We're going to do a 45-minute silent meditation now. I did put in the chat if you'd like to make a donation to Pali for Venmo or PayPal. Also, I put the link to be on her mailing list. If you're not, and those of you who are in here, if you're not on her mailing list, I'll put it over here. So just to make sure you sign up to get on her mailing list, we will not be having group next week. Next Wednesday, we will not be meeting. The day before Thanksgiving. I will not be here, so we are not meeting. Anything else you want to say before we?
No, thank you all so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's so much fun. It's a party, y'all.
Yeah.
Thank you all for showing up. Thank you. I wish I could see your faces. I don't have any issues with the eyesight issue, except sometimes I'm looking at my grandkids or these beautiful faces, and can I see you guys?
I can see you.
That's,
Very well seen. Yeah.
you are totally seen. Yes, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. You're welcome.
Robin, is Friday happening next week?
I believe Friday is happening unless we have a different discussion about that.
You'll be here.
Yeah.
that is-
Right.
Thank you so much. You were there, Raina. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Take care. Okay, we're going to go ahead and begin the
Yeah.
silent meditation. I'm setting the alarm and here we go. Om. Thank you, Pali. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Good night.
No more.